what we're looking at is the gospel and the stars. We are following the signs, basically, that God placed in the sky. The Hebrew word that I've mentioned already, Mazoroth, which begins with Virgo the Virgin, and we noted two distinct items in her hands, the ear of corn and the branch, and these are very symbolic. And again, part of looking at this and digesting it is knowing a lot of the terminology that we're looking at comes out of either Hebrew, Arabic, Greek, and if you go pretty much around most of the different maps, most of the different zodiacs, you'll find many of them are the same. There are a few that are odd, and I've been mentioning repeatedly the zodiac of Dandara, which is the finding that is Egyptian at its core. And what we find is that even with different images placed in there, they all of the nomenclature, all of the names of the stars point us back. And again, you can't escape this. It all points back to names that we have seen in the Word of God. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as we go through this. So if you remember here, Virgo the Virgin with her the branch in one hand, the corn in the other, that reminiscent, by the way. I think that these both have symbolism, and in that the corn in the one hand is pointing to what Christ said about himself in John 12:23. Actually, it's a little bit later than that. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone, but if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. I have a feeling that that is definitely what the symbolism is there. And in the other hand, the branch, again, repeated references to the branch, the coming one, the seed of the woman, the branch, pointing references to Christ. So we start there, and if you look at the brightest star, Al-Muridin is the one who shall come down, or the one having dominion. So we moved on to see Coma, which is the image of course, mother and child. This constellation consisting of 43 stars, and the meaning of this star is the desire, like the desire of all nations. With Centaurus, we have here 35 stars in the constellation, revealing the dual nature. And this dual nature, they're all connected. So when you think about the constellations, you have obviously Virgo, the Virgin, who will bring forth a child, the seed of the woman. The seed of the woman here is now, we're looking at the dual nature in Centaurus. Again, if we were picking apart all of the different stars inside, they all have names. It's safe to say that this is thousands of years old. And it's safe to say, I'm not talking about the stars in the sky, I'm talking about whoever named the stars. They are ancient, they are not new. This is not some new revelation of some kind. This is very old. So in this constellation, we have the star known as the despised, the sin offering. After that, we have Botes right here. We talked about him with the sickle right there, and you can see the various bright stars. Now, when I mention these, it's important to tell you that, you can only highlight on this map, you can only highlight the brightest, or we'll call it the first, second, or third magnitude of the brightest stars. But if I show you the map that has no drawings, which is just basically a map looking up in the sky, you can see there's much more there than these particular brightest ones that have been highlighted. So we have basically the shepherd guarding. As if you remember, I spoke about this sickle in his hand, raised up like about to reap the earth, all right? And so it's kind of interesting. The same shepherd who is guarding is also the shepherd who will reap. That sickle is symbolic of that. Next, we have Libra and the balances. This has 51 stars in it. The sign of the scales, reward and punishment, as I discussed. If you look at the brightest stars in Libra, we have, for example, Zubin al-Ganubi, the price deficient, Zubin al-Shemali, the price which covers, al-Gubi, heaped up, and Zubin akrabi, the price of conflict. So it's man weighed in the balance, but in the bigger picture, it's Christ's blood that covers all. The cross, the crux, and if you remember, I said some images show 4 or 5. This one actually, if you look carefully, has 4 bright stars and 2 lesser stars. Kind of interesting. But typically, we know it has 5 stars within it. Most are in agreement with this. The sign or mark of the cross, the death and finished work of Christ. Here we have lupus, and you can see the writing underneath here, the victim. All right, lupus or victim. The lupus has 22 stars. The victim, this is Christ's sacrifice once and for all. Now, again, you can't take these separately, because if you go back to Libra and the scales, it is the sacrifice of Christ that covers what should be weighed in the balance. So nothing here is separate. We can talk about the cross being the instrument to bring about not just the death of Christ, but the resurrection of Christ. We could talk about the dual nature of Christ. The Centaurus is embodying that. Now, what is important, Centaurus is holding some type of a weapon and a shield. And you might think, well, that's kind of strange, because you're saying the dual nature of Christ and also the victim, the sacrifice being slain. Well, just go back to the scriptures and remember that Christ himself, regardless of what any other person wants to pontificate about the scriptures, Christ said, "No man taketh my life, I lay it down myself." So I want you to think of that, because here's the dual nature, Centaurus, aiming at the victim. And these all are representing, not everything in the zodiac, but what I'm looking at right now represents the work of Christ. So let's move on here. We have the crown, the Corona Borealis, consisting of 21 stars belonging to the King of Kings. The brightest star in this crown is called Al-Feka, and you can see it's right there. Okay, bright light or shining radiant. And I'm going to now take another place here to look at. All right, so now we are at Scorpio. Large insect figure with 44 stars within it. The stingers, you can see, is lifted up in the position to attack or to sting. And we see it seeking to wound, but it crushes itself. Now, I say seeking to wound. I want you to take a look at something. What direction are these possible items going? And we've got 2 or 3 weapons here on this Scorpio. I want you to notice that one of the pinchers, actually this is the pincher claw, but one of them is going towards the scales. It's kind of between the scales and the serpent. And the other one, it could be reaching for the scales. It could be reaching for the victim. In other words, there's all of this grabbing for something. And until you get the figure clear, it just looks like, oh, well, there's a scorpion. But as I said, they're all attached. They're all doing something. The brightest star of the Scorpio is in its heart. And I don't think you can read the writing there, but it's Antares is the star, which means the wounding. The star in the tail, Lesath or Lesha, the perverse one. All right, we move on to serpents, and serpents is right here. And I want to try and show you. Now this goes all the way, so we're going to have a lot of scribbles all over this poor map now. So serpents is the serpent struggling with the seed of the woman. And obviously here we have Ophiuchus, which is the man, this struggle, the mighty one holding the serpent from what? Usurping the crown. Look at the mouth of the serpent headed right for the Corona Borealis, reaching or trying to usurp the crown. Serpens and Ophiuchus together have 134 stars. If you look from the serpent's mouth all the way through Ophiuchus and all the way to the tail. There's 134 stars here, and it is the contest for dominion. All right? Now, when I look at this figure, the first thing that I think, and I think I've already said this, is Ephesians 6. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, dark, you want to call them whatever is operating. That is the image, if there could be an image attached to that. One-on-one combat. Now, thank God Christ, his power was enough. But I look at this and I think to myself, one man is basically wielding and holding back this snake. And as I also pointed out, take a look at his foot, which is on or about to crush the scorpion's head. If you look at the brightest star inside serpents, and I think it's right here, is called Unuk, which means encompassing, or Alia, the accursed. So kind of interesting ideas here. Upside down, we've got the image of Hercules here. And Hercules has 113 stars, the mighty man, humbled yet victorious. All right, we can easily see the one who is to come to crush the serpent's head, to destroy the works of the devil. The star in the head of Hercules. Ras El Gethi, the head of him who bruises. And if you look carefully at this figure, you may see, it's not on here because I was using a different map, but you may see on some maps what another star called Corniferous, the kneeling branch. Again, I don't understand how the images were drawn, obviously, at a later time, but I don't understand how all of these stars, their names, keep referring back to, and as I said, I don't know how would you call Krishna the wounded one, the kneeling branch, the one who comes, the reaper, the deliverer? I don't think so. And as I said, it's speaking specifically of one singular person and one work that is covered in this book. There is a star in the elbow. Marsik, the translation for that is the wounding. And you're going to hear a lot of words, the wounded one, the wounding. The star in the upper part of the left arm, Ma'asian, the sin offering, while the star in the lower part of the right arm is called Ka'aim, treading underfoot. Okay, you can't make this stuff up, honestly. Let's move on to Sagittarius. Is 69 stars, the archer with his bow drawn. The names of the stars within this sign are quite significant. Naim, the gracious one, and Nun-Ki, the prince of the earth. Very interesting. All right, let me find Lyra. 43 stars in that image of what looks like a harp or a lyre with wings. It's got tail feathers and a head that is facing in one direction. It is the sign of praise, accompanying the victorious Redeemer. The brightest star here in this dot right there is called Vega. He shall be exalted. So it's kind of interesting that the association of that musical instrument, it is swiftly flying through the air. I've got to go to another page to be able to get, let me go back. All right, we'll go here to the Ara, which is the pyre. Okay, 9 stars, and this is symbolic of judgment prepared for the deceiver of the brethren and all of his minions. In the Arabic, it is al-Mugmara, the completing or the finishing off of something. I find this all interesting. If we didn't have the Bible and we were trying to make sense of this, after looking at each and every name of the star, what they represent, and going in the direction that we've been going, starting with Virgo and ending at Leo the lion, you find basically, as I've said, the complete unfolding of the gospel message. It is very, very clear. Every provision is made in here, and when you start to see it clearer, it's kind of like, okay, God maybe, when he placed all these stars, And I believe what the scripture says, that he named them before other languages and tongues were naming them. He placed them and he named them deliberately, I believe, so that in the event that this ever got corrupted or abandoned, there would always be the original in the sky. And I think God would give the wisdom, impart it to somebody to be able to say, this is what's written in the stars. All right, let's move on. Draco, the dragon, 80 stars. And this is simply Satan cast down and defeated. We have the enemy being depicted repeatedly in what I have said. Look for all of these different examples in different stages at different places. We probably could say that through all of these different serpent images, we probably have the casting down of Satan. Basically, his whole career is in the zodiac, not just all of Christ's work, but most of his work is there too. So kind of interesting. All right, we're going to move along. So Capricorn, you've got a goat head and a fish tail. All of these dual natures or dual emblems. So the sea goat, 51 stars within, life coming out of the sacrifice. Just like I've explained before, the goat is actually, if we were looking at it in the circle, the goat is actually kind of going down, like death is coming to the goat, and life, the fishtail, is coming out of the death of the goat. Very much the emblem that we see repeatedly, and that's why I keep referencing this whole concept of fish being the early image of Christianity, and even through Christ's words when he said, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. There's always this image of fish. So this image kind of tells us, if you kind of chop it off right there, there is death and what comes out of death, which is life, the fishtail. I'm going to jump in here. Let's look at Aquarius. We've got the man holding the urn out of which the water is flowing. Aquarius is 108 stars in the, we'll call it the watermen, the water and the watermen, the water being poured out, symbolizing the water of life, the spirit, life poured out for the redeemed. In the zodiac of Dendera, this man is holding two urns, and I thought that was pretty interesting. We see the fish coming out of the urns of both urns in that zodiac. The man is called Hupetyrion, meaning the place of him coming down or being poured out. And within this constellation, we have in the right shoulder of the man a star that is called Said al-Malik. The meaning of that is the pouring forth. More stars within this constellation and their meaning. Said al-Sun, he who goeth and returns. So there's a lot of the imagery here basically is of pouring forth, and it's no mistake, by the way, that you've got this giant fish, Piscis australis, or the southern fish, which is basically in the stream of the flow of the water that is being poured out. This interesting kind of flow. You're going to also see, by the way, Pegasus, the winged horse, correct? 89 stars, representing the swift return of the Redeemer. And as I said, you know, if you read certain books on mythology, you're going to find a lot of times there isn't some clarity. Because it's a mythological story, you don't get the clarity. But if you pursue this line of thinking, you're going to see that a lot of things in mythology actually have come out of the Bible, and I don't mean a winged horse, but representations of what they mean. There's always this kernel of truth. In the zodiac of Dendera, for the Pegasus, there are two characters directly beneath the horse, Pe and Ka, Peka or Pega, the chief, and Sus, which is where we get the name Pegasus. Some people think Pegasus, oh, it's a mythological, but no. If you look at the zodiac of Dendera, the Pe and the Ka, and there is a Sus put together, Pegasus. So the chief horse has come down, and that is the representation of the Pegasus. But it's also preserved for us almost in every language except for, I mean, obviously this is English on here, Pegasus, but the same thing. So we've got the same verbiage even from the zodiac of Dendera. Kind of, again, very interesting. The swan, right here, I don't know if you can see that. We'll make it a little bit darker because now I'm starting to have lots of scribbles. 81 stars within, the sure return of the Redeemer. The brightest star in the body between the head and the tail, called Deneb, means the judge. The star in the beak, Albirio, flying quickly or swiftly. And the star in the body is called Sedir, the one who returns again. There are also 2 stars in the tail, Azel, who goes and returns, and Fafaje, gloriously shining forth. So if I were just to stop and recap what we've seen, we see that the woman who brought forth the seed of the woman who was to bruise the serpent's head, one born of a virgin, the branch of God. Libra describes the Redeemer's work in action. Scorpio reveals the conflict. Sagittarius, the fulfillment of the promised victory. Then we see the work in Aquarius, which we were right down here, the man with the urn with the water flowing out. It is the Spirit of God poured out to make disciples. The fish are in abundance. Pisces will reveal the results of the conflict and its blessing, and eventually, when we get to Aries, the fulfillment of the promised deliverance. So what we can see, if you just keep looking, is it's very hard to imagine that there could be other meanings. We get to Pisces, all right? And in Pisces, we have 113 stars. The Hebrew, I've already said, dagim, fishes, plural. The sign of 2 fish bound by their tail by the same band and connected to Cetus. Very interesting. One going north, the other one going in the ecliptic path of the sun. Now, why this is so, this part here becomes a little bit more challenging. If you read other people's work on this, there's a lot of stuff there that I'm going to say not sure that I can agree with. Or if I look at what other people have said on this, it leaves me with kind of like, okay, let's see. And let me explain what I mean by that. I believe it was Seiss who wrote that the 2 fishes represent one fish representing the Christian and one fish representing Israel. I can't support that, and there's a reason why I can't support that. See, the Apostle Paul, he obviously coming out of being a Pharisee, coming out of Judaism, knowing all this, having an encounter with Christ, if you read what Paul wrote, there's not the sense of 2 different things going on. He even explains being grafted back in to the wild tree. In other words, that's to say that if something can be grafted in, it is not necessarily considered foreign, because if it can be grafted in and produce fruit within the same tree, it means they had to have been of the same essence. You couldn't graft in a car and expect it to grow fruit, right, into a tree. Do you see the point I'm making? So it's very hard for me when I read some of these writings. They are of a thought process that has been held by the church for a very long time. And somehow people get into this confusing about Israel and not Israel. And what I'm going to say to you is that the Jewish people were never seen as fish. Maybe gefilte fish, but not fish, okay? That's the Christians. So just park that one for now, and I would venture to say it would be much better if you're going to make an interpretation. When Jesus is speaking, he says basically, my sheep know my voice, but he also says, I have other sheep, not of this fold. And I'd say it's probably safer to say that these 2 being tethered, both by the tail but going in different directions, represent more along the line of what Jesus said than the interpretation of some of these commentators that would like to keep trying to place Judaism into the church under the guise of conflating Israel and Judaism. So I can't go there. I've already taught on this. I don't want to open that subject right now. But if you look here, you see you've got one fish going in the ecliptic of the sun, and one fish is going north. And I can simply say this. The thing that Paul did say, that there was a mystery hidden from the beginning of the earth. He says it in Romans 16:25. He says it in Ephesians 3:9. He says it in Colossians 1:26. Hid from ages and from generations, but is now made manifest. And I believe that that is the representation. The mystery hidden is now revealed. Christ and salvation in Christ. We're not walking around saying, what do we do? Because God has given us the solution in Christ. So the band that unites the two fish, al-risha, the band or the bridle, this speaks of the coming one, not in relation to conflict, but in relation to the redeemed. That's why I said I do not believe that this could be, as some would make it, the church in Israel. But he's coming for the redeemed. Now, I could say this, there will be a final call, according to the book of Revelation, there will be a final call of those preaching to all peoples who are on the earth, which could consist of people that are not Christian, that have not heard the word of Christ, or who have previously rejected it, which could encompass people that are from the Jewish faith, people from the Muslim faith, could be from anything else. So I can't say, oh, this is dogmatically that. I just say that the net will be cast out one final time, and those who are able to respond, God will enable them. Whatever the case of these two fish, they are both bound. I would go so far as to say that the cord that binds is Christ. We are his purchased possession, okay? We go on, we move on to Andromeda. Again, there's all these different interpretations. I'm going to tell you how I understand this. Here is a woman who, she is chained, but she is not chained. If you see, what is she bound to? I don't know. She's not bound to anything. Andromeda, 63 stars. The brightest star in the head is called Al-Firatz, the broken down. There is another star in her called the weak. I'm just going to circle some of these. Okay. The weak. In the foot, we have Al-Mah, struck down. So it gives you a sense. Andromeda, depending on where you're reading your sources, should not be interpreted as the woman who is ruling or overseeing. The church is always referred to in the feminine. So whether this is the church bound or the church freed. And again, some have even alluded to Andromeda being attached to Jerusalem, which is above, which is the mother of all. I can't tell you. This interpretation, again, is fraught with problems if you're looking at the whole picture. I'd say to you, if you're in doubt about this, keep going back to the work of Christ. What is the implication of Christ's work? If you're going to read these different commentaries, what would be the ramifications for Christ's work on this woman who is in chains, and what does she represent? So I'd go so far as to say that I do not believe that this is Israel again, but I do believe that this is a concept that we have to kind of wrap our minds around through the whole constellation. And why do I say that? Because she is bound, but she is free. She's not chained into something. The chains are floating. So we could say bought with a price and make that. But I think as we expand in this constellation, it becomes clear what she may represent. So let me move on. I want to move on to Cephas right here. Okay. Cephas, the mighty warrior, if you will, the brightest star in Cephas's shoulder, called Al-Derim, coming quickly, and in the girdle Al-Firk, the Redeemer, in the left knee Al-Re, the one who bruises. So it's safe to say that Cephas is friend and protector of the fish. And if you look carefully, it's hard to see it on here, but Cephas is also armed and has kind of this, we'll call it royal attire. It's kind of difficult to see, but he does have a crown on his head. Also, the name of the star, the royal branch. Come on. I mean, okay, yeah, I think it might be Isis, Krishna, I'm not sure. When you see all of these names and they go right back to the book, it's kind of like, come on, all right? I hate to sound like I'm being very repetitive, but the fact of the matter is I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion than what we're looking at. Okay, we've got, that's Taurus right there, and that's Aries right there. So I'm looking at this sign right now. 66 stars, the lamb or the ram. Aries, if you can see, is between Pisces and Taurus and is identified by a small group of 3 stars east of the Pleiades. This is interesting. In the mythological stories, the lamb was given to Nephil, to her 2 children. Hear me out, because sometimes you have to read mythology to find something in there that you can go, wonder where the ancients got that. In mythology, the lamb was given to Nephil by her 2 children, Phryxus and Hellas, when Ino, their immortal stepmother, was about to have them sacrificed to Jupiter. By clinging to the lamb's fleece and riding upon its back, the children escaped. Okay, how many times do we read about the blood covering, the blood protecting? Think of Exodus. And when they applied the blood, death passed over, right? And the same thing takes us to Christ, our Passover. So there's, within this mythological tale of Aries, it's very plain to see that if somebody was to make that assessment, we have a picture of an animal that would be used for sacrifice. So clinging to the sacrifice, the ones clinging to the sacrifice will be saved. It's kind of one of those things you have to kind of read between the lines. There's a lot more in mythology that if you read it, sometimes you can't see because it's got all these kind of weird stories attached to it. But you peel away a lot of that and you see that the ancients probably already had pilfered a lot of what was in the book. And I'm not going to apologize for that because you can see it plainly. So Christ, our Passover, worthy is the Lamb, of course, that was slain to receive power, wisdom, honor, and glory, and blessings. The Arabic name, Al-Hamal, the sheep, the merciful, the chief star in its forehead, which, don't know if you can see it, but the chief star in the forehead is El-Nath, the wounded or slain one. As we move through this horoscope, as we move through the zodiac, it's important just to kind of almost, if you were to take these images and write the story as you go, seed of the woman, the virgin that gave birth to a child, the child who is of a dual nature, and you move all the way around, you can see when you get to between Aries and Taurus, you're now kind of in that stretch to see more conflict occur. Back in Aries again, there are more stars. I'm just going to tell you the ones that are the brightest and the most known. The one in the left horn is called El Sharatan, the bruised, and the one that is more near to the back of the head is Mesartim, the bound. So I said this before, I think last week or 2 weeks. Our sun enters Aries on the 14th of Nisan. And if you recall biblically, another lamb was ordered to be slain, the Lord's Passover. So again, I think that there's just too much common ground between what we read in the book, the events that happen in the sky. And that's why I said when people talk about the birth of Christ, the timing of the birth of Christ, now you can kind of see why I say the wise men, this was no accident. They weren't just pursuing a singular star. If they were just pursuing a star, they wouldn't have had a lot of this other information to seek out this one to be born or that was born of a virgin. So it's almost like saying, I think, to be honest with you, yes, they were following the star, but I also think they could read the stars as we are reading them now. Equally, I think that they had a better understanding of times and signs in their proper seasons, like appointed times. So there are certain things that they knew, I believe, in their quest to seek out the Christ child, And we just think, oh, they followed a star. How convenient. Well, they followed a star, but as I said, I think they had a lot more information in the form of what we're looking at today. By the time of Christ's crucifixion, by the way, if you take what I just said about the 14th of Nisan, that the sun enters into Aries, by the time of Christ's crucifixion, not in shadow anymore, the 14th of Nisan becomes the remarkable coincidence, if you want to call it that, by God's design, I believe, that God ordained the times and seasons so that the noon time, it was dark. When darkness fell upon the land, when Christ was crucified, there was the ability for the sun to be in a specific place where this star would have most likely have been the most visible it could ever be at that particular time in time. So it's kind of interesting. It's almost like the stars were lining up to say, this is it, this is the work, and now it is finished. So very interesting. Here, Cassiopeia, the enthroned woman that bears 55 stars, the Arabic name for this constellation is El Sedir, the freed. The brightest star here in her left breast is called Shedir, the Hebrew word for freed or to be free. The other stars here, Kaf, also mean branch, and may also be correlated to the fact that you can't see it, but she's holding a branch in her hand. Again, the emblem of when Christ returns, his victory. Abu Mashar, who I've mentioned at the beginning of this series, said this constellation was anciently referred to as the daughter of splendor. And when I started to go down this pathway, it was almost like an impasse. Again, I will go back into his work, and I'm finding that the translated works that I have received are not exactly, in terms of verbiage, they're not exactly clear. So I will go back to the original Arabic work to see what I'm missing. But still pretty interesting when you see that this little figure right here went by another name according to him in antiquity. Okay, now I'm going to go back to Cetus, the sea monster. 97 stars, the brightest star is in the mandible. Menkar is the name, bound or chained enemy. The star in its neck, Mira, which means the rebel, and in the tail there's another star named Defida, the overthrown. You can see it right there. The overthrown, the thrust down, the defeated. And I don't think it's an accident that each one of these, there's no place where you're reading about the enemy, a type of the enemy where it says the victorious, the conqueror. It's all about the seed of the woman is the conqueror. And all of these other images have, basically, you're going down. That's the quick way of saying it, right? So just like Peter was saying, your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about to devour whom he may. You can see in every pocket of this zodiac, you're seeing he is there. And I think it's interesting, I've mentioned this before, when God is he's having a conversation with Job in the book of Job, and he says something we can easily turn into a caricature if we're not careful. When he says, canst thou draw Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put a hook in his nose, or bore his jaw through a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? Or wilt thou bind him for thy maiden? Shall thy companions make a banquet of him? In other words, I think what that conversation, when we read about Leviathan, if you go back and read it, I don't think that God was talking about some sea creature or some dragon-like. I think he was referring, these are references, if you read how he's personifying them, they are references to the devil. And remember, the book opens with Satan having kind of this dialogue, and have you considered my servant Job? So I don't think it's a long shot to look at that part of Job like that and see that the mention of Leviathan, which I keep saying, Cetus may represent that, some form of what the ancients called Leviathan. By the same power that upholds, if you remember, we saw the fishes that were attached, by the same power that upholds the fishes restrains the enemy. So it would be very easy. The fish are tethered to the back of sea. At some point you can see it, but they are moving away from him. So we might say the same power that can destroy can also protect. So Perseus, the breaker delivering his redeemed, a constellation of 59 stars, doesn't look like it, but 59 stars. This mighty man in the Hebrew is called Peretz, from which other languages achieve the word Perseus. In the zodiac of Dendera, Perseus, his name is Kar Kim, or Kenim, but I think it's Kem, he who fights and subdues. The stars inside Perseus, the breaker, in the waist, we have, it's hard to see it, but Merfak, who helps, the right shoulder, El Ganib, who carries away, and the bright star in the left foot, I don't know if you can see it, Athik, the one who breaks. So if I were going to now do a little bit more recapping, we go from Pisces forward. We have seen the fishes, the blessing of salvation. The band or the cord symbolizing the redeemed are either bound or tethered to him, therefore safe in his care. Andromeda, the kind of pseudo-chained woman, the redeemed in bondage and affliction. Cepheus, the crowned king and deliverer, coming to rule and to reign. The lamb of deliverance, the ram or the lamb of deliverance in Aries. Cassiopeia, freed and preparing her for marriage. That would be like the church, all right? Remember I gave the female reference or the feminine reference. Perseus, we just looked at the breaker, who is the mighty deliverer, come to bring us to his return with judgment and force in the sign of what? Taurus. So when I say to you they're all attached, it's like you can't look at the individual signs and see them in operation by themselves. Yes, as constellations, we identify how many stars, we identify if there's any type of movement whatsoever, if there's a lot of different questions. But I think if we're looking at it the way we have been, you have to kind of move through it and keep everything together. So Taurus, this constellation has 141 stars. Its head in position, take a look, down, and charging forward, his sharp horns ready to pierce his enemy. The Egyptians, as we know, worship the bull. And we know in ancient times the bull was called Rimu. In the Hebrew even, it's called Rimu. And Rimu was considered unbreakable. As I read in Job, I was looking up references of this word which occur in the Bible. Rimu occurs in our scripture. In Job, it says, will the Rimu be willing to serve thee, or abide by thy crib? Canst thou bind the Rimu and his band in the furrow? That's Job 39, 9 and 10. So that word Rimu is the biblical word for this creature. And I think I've already explained that the two horns meting out judgment. Balaam even mentions Rimu in Numbers 23. Balaam described the power of God on behalf of Israel like this. He is for them like the horns of the wild ox. Rimu, all right? So Taurus is the sign of coming judgment. Judgment, as the prophets declared, the day of vengeance, the day of our God, also described elsewhere as a day of wrath to come. That is the image. And I think what's pretty interesting is the bright star in the bull's eye is called Aldeberen, the governor, the captain, the leader, the judge. Kind of interesting. The star in the left horn is Elnath, the wounded. You keep hearing different words for wounded. Again, you can't miss this. Everything, when I'm reading this and I'm reading the wounded, Scripture comes into my mind. He was wounded for our transgressions, the wounded one. You keep hearing it, and it's like, okay, I think I got it. All right. So here is Orion, okay? 78 stars, one of the most brilliant of all of the constellations, a great hunter-like figure with a club in his right hand in the act of striking. All right? And the left hand is holding the skin of a slain lion. I had to go to different places to see. This does look like a lion. In some places, it's the head of Medusa. In his left foot, we have the act. Take a look. The act. Where is the foot? Well, it's on Eridanus. It looks like it is crushing or coming down. He is dressed like a strong fighter along with his, it's hard to see here, but there is a sword right here. And what's interesting about it is the hilt has the head of a lamb. Kind of interesting. The scriptures mention Orion as a constellation twice in Job, once in Amos. The Hebrew Chesil is the word for this, the strong one. The brightest star in the right shoulder, and I think you can see that big star right there, is Beltegus, meaning the coming of the branch. The star in his foot, Rigel, the foot that crushes. The star in his left shoulder, Bellatrix, swiftly destroying. And one of the three stars in the belt is Alnatic, the wounded one. Again, we have the wounded, right? All right, what he may be stepping onto, Eridanus. We call that the river of judgment, making up 84 stars in this constellation. And I think it's kind of interesting in Daniel's vision of the four beasts and the judgment of God upon them, we find similarities. Daniel says, I beheld till the thrones were set, and the Ancient of Days did sit. His throne was like a fiery flame, his wheels a burning fire, a fiery stream. A river of fire issued forth from before him. So we know that this is a river, but we also know it is a river of judgment. And this is why it's associated with things like the lake of fire. In the river of judgment, the judgment was set, the books were open, the prophet beheld, and even the beast was slain, his body destroyed and given to the burning flames. That's Daniel 7, 9 through 11. Isaiah wrote, Behold, the name of the Lord cometh from far, burning with his anger, and the burden thereof is heavy. His lips are full of indignation. His tongue is a devouring fire. His breath as an overflowing stream. So it's all of this pictorial imagery in verbiage that kind of puts dimensions of this in clarity. We know, even when Christ was speaking, when he was talking, he said there was an everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. It is very obvious, kind of interesting, that this Cetus creature, by the way, look where his two paws are. His two paws are like, I think I'm going to take a dip, right? So you can do with that what you want. But if you look carefully, where you have Taurus, and I already said judgment, and take a look at his feet. They're not touching Eridanus. It looks like he's flying over it, right? And remember what I said to you, that the image of the bull is Christ's judgment. So it's like he's flying over. He himself is not judged, but he brings the judgment, if you will, the swift judgment with him. All right, here, Auriga. 66 stars, and we call Auriga the shepherd. We see the great shepherd seated in the Milky Way, and it doesn't look like he's sitting on much, but he's got a she-goat right there in his arms. It's kind of interesting. We know it's a she-goat by the star that tells us the star's name is she-goat, all right? But what we're seeing really is the tender care of the master. If we look carefully, there are two, you cannot see it here, but there are actually two smaller kids not visible in his lap that would be right about here. The two tiny little baby kids. There's the she-goat and two kids there. I think this is the image of our great shepherd. I will save my flock, they shall be no more a prey. The brightest star in his body, in the body of the goat, is Alioth, which means she-goat. The star in the shepherd's right arm is called Menkilinon, meaning the band or chain of the goats. And it looks like he cares for them. If you could see it in clarity, the she-goat looks like it has leapt into the shepherd's arms, but is looking fearfully away like, oh, save me from whatever is out there. And the two babies that are in his lap, which you cannot see here, they just look oblivious. It's not like they look like anything. They just, okay. So to me, it shows tender care for those that have clung to him, all right? In his right foot, again, like in Aries, there is a star here. The name is repeated, El Nath, which means the wounded. Again, it keeps being repeated. He is indeed the good shepherd who gave his life for the sheep. He's also the great shepherd brought again from the dead, as Hebrews 13:20 declares, and he's called the chief shepherd out of 1 Peter. In the zodiac of Dendera, the man, instead of carrying a she-goat, is carrying a scepter. That's why I said to you, I think the ancients knew more things than we do. He's carrying a scepter known as Trun. The scepter was called Trun. This is a scepter like no other. At the top of the scepter, there was a goat's head, and at the very base or the bottom, it ends in a cross. So for the Egyptians, the cross was a sign of life, not death. Kind of interesting. That's something to probably look into a little bit deeper. But just how they understood this symbol is pretty powerful. I would go so far as to say, making the jump from the zodiac of Dendera, it's almost like saying, in his arms is eternal life. If you're going to take the interpretation out of the zodiac of Dendera, it's pretty profound. So I will leave you with this thought today. If you connect kind of two connecting constellations, it reveals the truth about Eridanus, that is the river, this river of death, the lake of fire, and Auriga together. And it's, if you read Malachi 4, verses 1 through 3, behold, the days cometh, it burneth as a furnace, and all the proud and all that work wickedness shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth as a gambol of calves of the stall, and ye shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet in the day that I do make this, saith the Lord of hosts. Why this is so profound, I said there is a connection between Auriga and Eridanus, is you're seeing what is in Auriga, life tightly in the arms of the Savior. You can take any passage where he says he goes after the one that's lost. That could be the image of that, versus Eridanus, which is lost forever in this lake of fire. So I want to leave you with this thought today. I wish that people, anybody that's listening to me might say, wow, it's a lot of crazy stuff she's talking about. But the reality is, if people actually push through the cloud of most things that are said, even most of the things I said today, to get to the hard points, I don't know why anybody wouldn't say, if they don't know about Christ and they don't know about life eternal and they don't know what awaits them on either side of the fence, I don't know why somebody wouldn't say, I'm going to find out everything I can about the work of Christ, about the person of Christ, about the nature of Christ. I'm going to find out everything I can. And I'm talking about those people who just simply look at what we do and kind of, it's like, See, for me, you could put many things in front of me. But I'm looking at just this map, knowing it's connected to my Bible, and knowing that God somehow wanted to make sure that we were listening, that he had our ear, that he had our heart, that he had our mind. And each one of these represents his tender care. In fact, I'm just looking down here at my map, and I could keep going. The ship that is labeled Argo on my map, right here, which, I think about it. You know the word analusios? That's some of you, but not all of you. Paul, when he said, the time of my departure is at hand, he was using this concept as a ship that is just getting started, not coming into rest, but just getting started, when he was trying to say basically his time to be promoted is near. He didn't say it's all over, it's ending. He was talking about it as a great departure, like a ship setting sail. Here is your ship with people who will board the ship and it will bring them home safely. There's so much in this zodiac that if people would just open their eyes and recognize God had a plan all along, and that plan basically consisted on something very easy, that we come to know who he is, we come to trust him, we walk with him, we let him be the guide of our life, and in doing so, he says, you know what? It's a little crazy down here for right now, but I'm with you. You're not alone, and you'll be with me forever. Wherever I am, you will be with me. I don't know who could refuse, who could look at this and say, oh, that's not for me. So you're telling me that you'd like some other alternative? Tell me what the other alternative is. Tell me that somebody has, even in the history of humankind, presented anything so unbelievable, and it is, as simply presenting oneself to be accepted into the beloved for one simple thing, trusting him, faithing in him. And all of this reveals his work, that if only you came to the cross, if only you came to see him, if only you worshiped him, it would be enough. The sacrifice wouldn't have been wasted. We have a sea full of people in these United States of America who are not, they're not saved. They go to church every week to be entertained in their mega churches. They go to church to be told how great they are, and you may be a great person, but the Bible says we are all not good. We are all not okay. All have sinned. All are in need of salvation. So all I can tell you is, whether we're looking to the zodiac or whether we're looking into the book, it's pretty simple. God has a plan if you'll trust him. And that's a lot of this stuff is said very glibly and very easily. But yes, God does have a plan. If it's written in the stars, you might say, well, what about this book? Men handled, humankind handled the word, and maybe they corrupted it. Okay, argue this with me, argue the stars. Who made those to a lie? Who made those to deceive you? Who made those, and name them as such, that you shouldn't be confused, but have great clarity and confidence that the God that we serve is not only in charge of the little tiny stars, people on this earth, but the great and brilliant luminaries that shine down upon us each and every night, even though we cannot behold them. Think about that. Pretty simple. For right now, that's my message. I'm Pastor Melissa Scott, pastor of Faith Center, Glendale, California. I teach every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. If you'd like to attend services with us, simply call the 800 number, that is 800-338-3030, to join us. If you'd like to watch, listen, and learn 24 hours a day, simply log on to our website at www.pastormelissascott.com.